The void erupted in flames as Captain Elena Torres's fighter spun through the debris field, alarms screaming in her cockpit. The battle between the Earth Defense Force and the Vorkath Armada had turned the space around Europa into a graveyard of twisted metal and frozen fire. Her squadron was gone, picked off one by the alien vessels that moved like liquid mercury through the stars. "Telone leader, do you copy?" Static crackled through her comms. "Captain Torres, respond." Elena gritted her teeth, wrestling with her controls as another explosion rocked her ship. Through her canopy, she watched a massive Vorkath warship emerge from the chaos, its biomechanical hull gleaming with an otherworldly iridescence. The sight still struck her with awe, even after 3 years of war. A smaller craft detached from the warship's side, sleek and deadly. Elena's tactical display identified it as a Vorkath Striker, their equivalent of an elite fighter pilot. The craft moved with impossible grace, weaving through the battlefield debris like it was dancing among the stars. Elena knew she should retreat. Her fuel was low, her weapons nearly depleted. But something about the way that Striker moved called to her warrior spirit. This wasn't just any pilot, this was someone special. The dance began. Human and alien technology clashed in a deadly ballet, neither able to gain the upper hand. Elena's muscles burned as she pushed her ship to its limits, matching the Vorkath pilot maneuver for maneuver. Their battle took them closer to Europa's surface, where geysers of ice erupted from fissures in the moon's frozen crust. A flash of movement caught Elena's eye. In the Striker's cockpit, she glimpsed her opponent, a feminine figure with silvery skin and phosphorescent markings that pulsed with the rhythm of battle. Their eyes met across the void, recognition sparking between two warriors who understood each other without words. The moment shattered as a stray missile from the larger battle above struck Elena's wing. Her ship spiraled out of control, systems failing. Through her spinning view, she saw the Vorkath Striker caught in the same explosion, both of them now plummeting toward Europa's surface. The impact was devastating. Elena's escape pod deployed automatically, but the landing was still brutal. She awoke to find herself in a crystalline canyon, her pod half buried in the ice. The atmosphere was thin but breathable thanks to her suit's filters. In the distance, she saw smoke rising from where the Vorkath Striker had crashed. Every instinct told her to run, to call for extraction. Instead, Elena found herself trudging through the knee-deep snow toward the crash site. As she approached, she saw the Vorkath pilot trapped in the wreckage, both legs crushed beneath twisted metal. The alien's luminescent markings flickered weakly, like a failing light. The pilot's helmet had shattered, revealing features that were both alien and hauntingly beautiful. Her silver skin was traced with patterns that seemed to shift and flow, and her eyes were pools of swirling cobalt. Blood the color of starlight seeped from her wounds. Those eyes fixed on Elena as she approached, filled not with hatred but with a warrior's acceptance of fate. The Vorkath pilot spoke, her translator damaged but functional, ended quickly, "Human. Grant me a warrior's death." Elena looked down at her sidearm, then back at the injured alien. In that moment, she made a decision that would change the course of two civilizations. She holstered her weapon and reached for her medical kit instead. "My name is Elena Torres," she said, kneeling beside her former enemy. "And I didn't come here to kill you." The Vorkath pilot's markings pulsed with surprise. After a long moment, she responded, "I am Nixera, Blade of the Seventh House. And you, Elena Torres, are either the bravest or most foolish human I have ever encountered." As the battle raged on above them, human and alien worked together in the frozen canyon, fighting not for victory but for survival. Neither knew it yet, but their crash landing on Europa would become the spark that would eventually end a war and unite two species who had forgotten they could be anything but enemies. The howling winds of Europa carried ice crystals that cut like microscopic knives. Elena worked frantically to free Nixera from the wreckage, her suit's heating system struggling against the moon's brutal cold. The Vorkath warriors' bioluminescent markings had grown dimmer, pulsing in an erratic rhythm that Elena suspected matched her alien heartbeat. The cold, Nyxera managed through gritted teeth, her translator glitching. It burns. Elena's hands moved quickly over her medical scanner. Vorkath physiology was largely unknown to humans, but the readings were clear enough. Nyxera's core temperature was dropping dangerously. The alien silver skin had taken on a bluish tinge, and frost was forming along the edges of her wounds. Your species runs hotter than ours, Elena muttered, more to herself than her patient. She reached into her survival pack and pulled out her emergency thermal blanket. This is going to hurt, but we need to move you somewhere sheltered. Nyxera's laugh was harsh and bitter. Pain is nothing new in war, human. But why do you help? We are meant to kill each other. Elena paused in her work, meeting those swirling cobalt eyes. Maybe that's exactly why I'm helping. Someone has to be first to stop shooting. Using her suit's enhanced strength, Elena carefully lifted Nyxera from the wreckage. The alien warrior was surprisingly light, her body structure more avian than mammalian. The movement drew a hiss of pain from Nyxera, but she remained stoically silent otherwise. Elena's scanner had detected a network of ice caves nearby. She carried Nyxera through the crystalline landscape, their path lit by the aliens' failing bioluminescence and the distant glow of Jupiter hanging massive in the sky. The caves, when they reached them, were a marvel of natural architecture, smooth walls of ancient ice that seemed to capture and amplify what little light reached them. Your legs, Elena said as she set up a makeshift medical station. They're cybernetic compatible, aren't they? I've seen Vorkath warriors with prosthetics before. Nyxera's markings flickered with what might have been surprise. You are well informed. Yes, our bodies are designed to accept technological enhancement. But without proper facilities. I've got something that might help. Elena dug through her pack and pulled out a compact field surgery kit. Standard issue for deep space missions. It's got a basic bioprinter and nerve connector suite. Human tech, but the principles should be similar. The alien warrior watched with obvious curiosity as Elena laid out her equipment. You came prepared to save enemy lives, Captain Torres. Elena, she corrected. And I came prepared to save lives, period. She activated the bioprinter's holographic interface. Though I'll admit, I never thought I'd be using it on a Vorkath warrior. As Elena worked to stabilize Nyxera's condition, the alien began to speak, her voice growing stronger as the medical nanites did their work. She told Elena of her home world, of cities that floated in the upper atmosphere of a gas giant, of how her people had once been peaceful explorers before fear and misunderstanding had led them to war. We thought humans were invaders, Nyxera said, watching as Elena carefully attached temporary neural interfaces to her damaged legs. Your ships appeared without warning at our outer colonies. We didn't understand your signals were attempts at communication. Elena's hands stilled for a moment. And we thought your defense response was an invasion. She shook her head. 3 years of war because neither side waited to ask questions. A sudden tremor shook the cave, sending ice crystals raining down from above. Both warriors tensed, recognizing the distinctive sound of orbital bombardment. The battle was moving closer to their position. Your people will be looking for you, Nyxera said quietly. As will mine. They will not understand this. She gestured between them. Elena finished securing the temporary prosthetic connectors and sat back on her heels. Then we make them understand. But first, we need to get you mobile. She pulled up the bioprinter's interface again. These won't be pretty, but they should get you walking. Ready to trust human technology? Nyxera's markings pulsed with what Elena was beginning to recognize as amusement. I already trust a human warrior who should be my enemy. What is a little more trust between friends? The word friends hung in the air between them, as unexpected as it was genuine. Outside, the war raged on, but in their ice cave on Europa, something new was taking root, an understanding that transcended species and politics, born in the moment when an enemy's hand reached out not to harm, but to heal. The makeshift prosthetics hummed with energy as Nyxera took her first tentative steps in the ice cave. Her bioluminescent markings pulsed erratically with the effort, casting shifting shadows on the crystalline walls. Elena stood nearby, ready to catch her if she fell, but maintaining enough distance to respect the warrior's pride. The neural interface is different, Nyxera said, her voice tight with concentration. Your technology speaks a strange language to my nervous system. She wobbled slightly but caught herself against the wall, leaving glowing handprints where her skin contacted the ice. The bioprinter did its best to adapt to your physiology, Elena explained, monitoring the readings on her medical scanner. But you're right, it's not perfect. Think of it like learning a new dialect. Nyxera took another step, more confident this time. In my culture, we have a saying, knowledge flows like light through crystal. She gestured to her luminescent markings. We share information through patterns of light and color. Yet here I am, learning to walk again through human technology that knows nothing of light speech. Elena watched as Nyxera's natural bioluminescence began to synchronize with the soft blue glow of the prosthetics power cores. Maybe our technologies aren't so different after all. They're both trying to communicate, just in different ways. A distant explosion interrupted their moment of understanding, reminder enough that they were still in a war zone. The cave trembled, and both warriors instinctively moved to protect each other, Elena reaching for her weapon, Nyxera shifting into a defensive stance despite her new legs. Your adaptation rate is remarkable, Elena noted, trying to lighten the tension. Most humans take weeks to adjust to new prosthetics. Nyxera's markings flickered with what Elena now recognized as pride. We Vorkath are taught from birth to embrace change. Our bodies are designed to evolve, to accept improvements. She paused, running a hand along the smooth surface of her temporary legs. Though I never imagined my evolution would come through human hands. As they continued their practice, Nyxera shared more about Vorkath culture. Their cities were living things, grown rather than built, powered by the same bioluminescent energy that flowed through their bodies. Their technology was a fusion of organic and mechanical, each enhancing the other. That's why the war has been so devastating, Nyxera explained, executing a careful turn. Your weapons don't just destroy our ships, they kill living tissue. Each loss is felt like the death of a limb. Elena's face darkened with understanding. We thought we were just destroying machines. We had no idea. She watched as Nyxera completed another circuit of the cave. How many deaths could have been prevented if we'd just talked first? The past cannot be undone, Nyxera said, coming to rest beside Elena. But the future. Her markings pulsed with a new pattern, one that seemed to reach out toward Elena. Tell me of your people. Not as warriors, but as beings who dream and create. For hours, they exchanged stories. Elena spoke of Earth's oceans, of human music and art, of the first faltering steps into space. Nyxera described the gas giant rings where young Vorkath learned to fly, the harmonies of their light songs, the deep connection they shared with their living technology. As they talked, Nyxera's control over the prosthetics grew stronger. Her movements became more fluid, more natural. The human technology and Vorkath biology were learning to work together, much like the two warriors themselves. You know what this means, don't you? Elena finally said, gesturing to Nyxera's legs. If our technologies can adapt to each other so easily, if we can learn to communicate despite our differences, then perhaps our peoples can do the same, Nyxera finished. Her markings had taken on a new pattern, one Elena hadn't seen before, hope, she would later learn. Their moment of understanding was shattered by a sharp beep from Elena's communications unit. Through the static, broken voices could be heard, human voices, getting closer. Simultaneously, Nyxera's markings detected the distinctive energy signatures of approaching Vorkath scouts. The two warriors looked at each other, knowing their time in isolation was ending. Whatever understanding they had built in their ice cave would soon be tested by the harsh realities of their people's conflict. They will not understand, Nyxera said softly, her new legs shifting into a ready stance. Neither your people nor mine are ready to see what we have learned. Elena checked her weapon but didn't draw it. Then we make them ready. Everything changes with a first step. She smiled at Nyxera's prosthetics. You've already proven that. Outside, the sounds of searching parties grew closer. Inside their crystal sanctuary, Human and Vorkath stood together, preparing to face whatever came next. They had already changed each other's worlds, perhaps now they could change everyone else's. The crystalline corridors of the ice cave echoed with approaching footsteps. Elena and Nyxera positioned themselves at the junction of two tunnels, their backs to each other. Elena's hand rested on her holstered weapon while Nyxera's bioluminescent markings pulsed with alert patterns, her new prosthetics humming quietly in the tense silence. 3 human signatures from the west tunnel, Elena murmured, checking her scanner. And your people? For Vorkath life signs approaching from the east, Nyxera replied, her markings shifting to a warning pattern. Including a high commander. The first group to reach them was Human, a special operations team led by Commander Marcus Davidson, Elena's former mentor. His face, visible through his helmet visor, shifted from relief to confusion to anger as he took in the scene before him. Captain Torres, he said, his voice sharp with authority, step away from the alien. Now. Before Elena could respond, the Vorkath team emerged from the opposite tunnel. Their leader's crystalline armor caught the light from Nyxera's markings, throwing rainbow patterns across the ice walls. High Commander Vexthor's face was a mask of cold fury. Blade Nyxera, he said in perfectly translated English, you disgrace your house by consorting with the enemy. The cave fell into tense silence, broken only by the soft hum of weapons powering up on both sides. Elena felt Nyxera shift slightly behind her, adjusting her stance on her new legs. Commander Davidson, Elena said clearly, keeping her hands visible, High Commander Vexthor. Before either of you do something that can't be undone, I ask that you listen. Listen. Davidson scoffed. To what? How you betrayed everything we've fought for. No, Nyxera interrupted, her voice strong and clear. Listen to how we discovered everything we've been fighting for is based on a lie. Elena took a careful step forward, drawing all eyes to her. 3 years ago, our peoples met in darkness. We didn't understand each other's methods of communication. Fear turned to violence, and violence became war. She gestured to Nyxera's prosthetics. But look at what we've achieved here. Human technology and Vorkath biology, working in harmony. These legs, Nyxera added, taking a step of her own, are proof that our differences can become our strengths. When I was injured, Captain Torres could have left me to die. Instead, she showed me that humanity is capable of something we thought impossible, mercy toward an enemy. Vexthor's crystalline armor clicked as he shifted position. You speak of mercy, but their weapons have torn apart our living ships, murdered our children. And your bioweapons have devastated our colonies, Davidson countered, his finger tightening on his trigger. Yes, Elena said firmly. We have both committed atrocities. We have both lost too much. But right here, right now, we have a chance to stop it. She reached back without looking, and Nyxera's hand met hers. Their fingers intertwined, human skin against luminescent alien flesh. The gesture was not lost on either side. The Vorkath believe in evolution, Nyxera said, her markings pulsing with determination. We pride ourselves on adapting, on growing beyond our limitations. Yet we've been trapped in this war, unable to evolve past our fear and hatred. And humans, Elena continued, pride ourselves on our ability to explore, to learn, to understand the unknown. But we've forgotten that in our rush to defend ourselves from what we don't understand. The cave fell silent again, but this time the silence held something different, the first fragile seeds of comprehension. Davidson's weapon lowered slightly. Vexthor's crystalline armor dimmed from battle-ready brightness. "You realize what you're asking?" Davidson finally said. "The brass will never accept this. Nor will the High Council," Vexthor added, but his tone had lost some of its edge. "They will," Elena said with quiet confidence, "because they'll have no choice. Look around you. Look at what we've achieved in this cave. A Vorkath warrior walking on human-made legs. A human soldier speaking with Vorkath light patterns." She held up her free hand, where Nyxera had taught her to create a simple luminescent greeting. "We are the future you've been fighting against. And we're not going back." Nyxera's markings surged with a pattern that made the Vorkath soldiers step back in surprise. "I am Blade Nyxera of the 7th House, and I declare the peace right of evolution. Who among you would deny our people the chance to grow beyond this war?" The ancient formal challenge hung in the air. Elena felt the shift in the cave's atmosphere as both sides wrestled with the implications of what they were witnessing. This was more than a chance meeting of former enemies, it was the first step toward a fundamental change in how their species saw each other. Commander Davidson was the first to fully lower his weapon. "I must be out of my mind," he muttered, then keyed his calm command, "This is Davidson. We've got a situation here that's going to need diplomatic intervention. Priority 1. High Commander Vexthor's armor shifted to its passive state, and he touched his chest in a formal gesture. "The peace right is acknowledged, Blade Nyxera. The High Council will hear of this evolution." As the tension in the cave began to dissipate, Elena and Nyxera remained standing together, their hands still clasped. They had crossed the boundary between their species, and in doing so, they had opened a door that could never truly be closed again. 1 month after the confrontation in Europa's ice caves, Elena stood before the combined Council of Earth and Vorkath representatives aboard the neutral station Harmony Point. Through the station's vast observation window, Jupiter's swirling storms provided a fitting backdrop for this historic moment. Beside her, Nyxera's prosthetics had been replaced with permanent ones, a hybrid design that merged human engineering with Vorkath biotechnology. The chamber hummed with tension as delegates from both species faced each other across the crystalline conference table. Some humans shifted uncomfortably under the pulsing lights of Vorkath communication, while several Vorkath representatives squinted at the harsh artificial lighting humans preferred. "What you propose is unprecedented," Admiral Chen of the Earth Defense Force said, his weathered face stern. "Integrating our technologies, sharing our knowledge." "With respect, Admiral," Nyxera interrupted, her markings glowing with quiet confidence, "unprecedented does not mean impossible. I stand before you as living proof." She took a deliberate step forward, the soft hum of her hybrid legs drawing all eyes. "These prosthetics represent more than just a merger of our technologies, they represent what we can achieve together." The Vorkath High Counselor, Zareth, raised a crystalline hand. "The blade speaks truth, but truth is not always enough. Our peoples have spilled too much blood. Which is exactly why we need this," Elena responded, activating a holographic display. Images appeared showing the progress made in the past month, human doctors working alongside Vorkath healers, engineers from both species collaborating on new designs, the first tentative cultural exchanges. "In 1 month," she continued, "we've made more progress in understanding each other than in 3 years of war. The medical techniques we've developed together have already saved lives on both sides. The communication protocols we've established have prevented 3 potential combat situations from escalating." Nyxera's markings pulsed in agreement. "And this is only the beginning. My people have already begun adapting our living ships to accommodate human crew members. Your space stations are being modified to support our bioluminescent communication methods." A murmur ran through the assembled delegates. Admiral Chen leaned forward. "And what of the cost? The sacrifices already made?" "The greatest honor we can give to those we've lost," Elena said softly, "is to ensure their deaths were not meaningless. Let their sacrifice be the foundation of lasting peace, not an excuse for endless war. The chamber fell silent as her words sank in. Then, from the back of the room, a young human engineer stood up. The hybrid prosthetics project has applications beyond military use, she said. We're already seeing possibilities for improving civilian medical care on both sides. A Vorkath scientist rose next. And our studies of human adaptation mechanisms have revealed new paths for our own evolution. Together, we are stronger than alone. One by one, more voices joined in, practical, hopeful voices speaking of cooperation and possibility rather than suspicion and fear. Elena felt Nyxera's hand slip into hers, a gesture that no longer drew shocked stares but instead seemed to symbolize everything they were fighting for. High Counselor Zaretha's crystalline armor shifted, reflecting the hope growing in the chamber. Perhaps, he said slowly, it is time for the Vorkath to embrace our greatest teaching, that evolution comes in many forms, even those we do not expect. Admiral Chen looked around the chamber, then at Elena and Nyxera. His expression softened. And perhaps it's time for humanity to remember that our greatest achievements have always come from reaching out, not pulling back. He stood. I move to formally establish the Joint Species Development Initiative, with Captain Torres and Blade Nyxera as its first directors. The vote that followed was unanimous. Later, standing alone in the observation deck, Elena and Nyxera watched Europa rotate slowly below them. The ice moon caught Jupiter's light, glowing like a pearl in the darkness. Do you ever think about that day? Elena asked. When we crashed. Nyxera's markings rippled with amusement. When you foolishly saved your enemy instead of finishing her off. Her prosthetic legs hummed as she turned to face Elena. I think about how one person's choice can change the course of history. We're not done yet, Elena reminded her. There's still so much work to do. Yes, Nyxera agreed, her markings shifting to a pattern of determination that Elena had learned to read. But now we walk that path together, as neither human nor Vorkath, but as something new. Something better. Below them, Europa continued its eternal dance around Jupiter, its ice caves now empty but forever marked by the moment when two enemies chose to see each other as people first. In the vastness of space, a new light had begun to shine, not the light of war, but of understanding, of growth, of hope. And in that light, both species could finally see a future worth evolving toward.